Good morning and welcome to the Sunday service of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Lake Norman. We are an open and inclusive congregation. Being UUs, our members walk very diverse paths to find meaning and purpose. But we're united by our belief in the inherent worth and dignity of all, and by the responsibility to express our faith through acts of justice and compassion. My name is Sandy McFeely, and I've been an active member of this congregation since 2013. Because COVID-19 is still on the rise, sadly, we are staying with this format where the music and speakers are live and the congregation is live from various places around the state. We are grateful to Autumn Weathers for being firmly at the controls and for posting a recording of the service on the website and on YouTube. During the service itself, you and the congregation will have your Zoom connection muted. After the chalice is extinguished, it's entirely your call when and whether to join in the chat. Everyone, members, friends, and especially visitors, is invited to the chat to talk with our guest speaker, with Reverend Pat, and with each other. Our speaker today is David Novak. He's a legendary storyteller and a teaching artist. This is his second visit to our congregation. The title of his talk today is The Storyteller's Fire. It will include stories and musings for mid-February, also known as the month of fevers. I was intrigued by David's question. What healing fires are drawing out winter and bringing on spring? Our opening words today are from Barbara Wells. O spinner, weaver of our lives, your loom is love. May we who are gathered here be empowered by that love to weave new patterns of truth and justice into a web of life that is strong, beautiful, and everlasting. And now Mike Alec will take us with his music into a time of worship and contemplation and optimism. When we gather as a community, we light a chalice and offer a thought about what it means to do so. Today's chalice lighting words are these. We light this flaming chalice to illuminate the world we seek. In our search for truth, may we be just. In our search for justice, may we be loving. And in loving, may we find peace. Ours is a spiritual, and caring community, where we find our joys amplified and our sorrows lessened. We would ordinarily take this time to share our personal joys and sorrows, but many are too personal and private for so public a space. The chat time after the service will be available, and of course, Reverend Pat is always ready to provide pastoral care. For now, we recognize and embrace all those joys and concerns that remain in our hearts, unspoken. David Novak will tell us our story for all ages today. It's called The Bringing of Fire, as part of his presentation that starts right now.
Thank you, Sandy. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be able to speak to you in living person and be back here again around the year. And here we are again, just a little bit past the midpoint between winter solstice and spring equinox. It's still the storytelling season. And traditionally, and throughout the Northern Hemisphere, stories were to be told only after the first frost and then until the first thaw. And I guess in anticipation of today's gathering, last night we had another frost. We had a little flurry of snow fall down this morning and ice crystals everywhere. The world, I guess, is ready for stories, and I hope you are too. This time of year to tell stories together, it helps to have, well, a little hearth fire that can keep us warm and enchant us with the flickering flames and the lights and the sounds of the crackling fire. But since we are in a virtual world, I'm going to ask you to help me create a storyteller's fire virtually. And we will then see if we can't get the fires burning for our story time this morning. Now, to build a good storytelling fire, we need to gather together different kinds of wood. We want to start with tiny twigs that are dry and brittle and will catch fire quickly. That'll be our kindling. You know, the word kindling is related to the German candle, a little light. A Kindle is not an electronic book. It's a little light that gets a big fire going. So let's take some twigs. Can you pick up a few imaginary twigs there and set them down where you're going to make a little nest for your fire to get started? And then on top of those twigs, we're going to need some branches that are a little heftier, but they have to be good and dry. So you need to give them a good crack, see if they're going to make a snapping sound like that. See? Right now, if I pick up a branch and it does this, yeah, that's too green. You'll get a smoky fire. No good for fire, right? Toss that aside. Yeah, so let's put some branches on the twigs, and we'll get those together. And then, to last the whole fire long, the whole story time long, we want a nicely seasoned log, right? So get your log, and we'll put that up there. Okay, so we've got our twigs, we got our branches, we got our log. Now, all we need to do to get that fire started is to strike a match. We drop it among the twigs. Now listen. The first sounds you hear will come from those twigs as they start to, like that. Now can you make a little snapping sound like that, like the twigs? If you're not good at snapping, that's all right. You can use your tongue or your cheek. Yeah, and get those twigs going. They're snapping, and they're warming up, and they're spreading. And they're heating up the branches. Now, when the branches get hot, they're going to make a sound like this. You're going to make a hollow cup-like shape with one hand, and then you're going to play it like a drum, like that. Hear that popping sound that you get in a good fire? Now, let's mix it together. Twigs and the branches there. There we go. Yeah, you can hear that fire blazing now, right? It's starting to get really hot. So the fire is going to reach that log, and the log is going to start to burn. And when the log starts to burn, it makes a sound like... Can you get it? Yeah, there we go. Come on, snap that hand. Yeah, right. Now let's mix it all together. We got the log, we got the branches, and we got the twigs. Can you hear that sound? All right. When we're all together next in the same room, we're going to hear that fire spread and echo off the walls as the flames jump up. Now, got to help me out now, everybody. Now, get those flames up higher and hotter and faster and hotter, and then hold your hands out. Now, if you're like me, your hands are warm and tingling from that fire. See, storytelling is the original virtual reality. And as the flames die down and the embers glow, then it's a good time to tell a story from a long time ago. Long ago, far away, far to the west and the south in the ocean, on the island of Tonga, was a boy. The boy's name was Maui. Maui was mischievous. Maui was tricky. And Maui was magic. He could change his shape. I think in childhood we are shapeshifters all the time. And he could change his shape into anything he wanted to be. Now Maui's father was a fisherman, a very famous fisherman, but that's another story. He was a good father, and Maui was a curious boy. For Maui's father had secrets. And Maui wanted to know some of those secrets. One secret that Maui was very curious about was the way that his father would bring fish up out of the sea, and then he would go away for a while and come back in the evening, and the fish would have been transformed. It would have been cut up into pieces. It would be steaming. It would be savory. It would make good eating. Maui wanted to know, how did his father do this with the fish? Well, he followed his father. And in order that his father would not see him, Maui became a little bird. And as a little bird, he fluttered after his father, and he watched his father carrying his string of fish up to a rock face in the middle of the island. And then he saw the rock face open, and a cave appeared that went deep down into the world below. Just before the cave closed, Maui flitted through and followed his father. And there he found his father in an underworld garden, gathering herbs and cleaning the fish beside a little circle of stones. Maui turned back into himself, and his father saw him there and said, "Maui, what are you doing here? This is a secret place." Maui said, "I want to know how it is that you change the fish from the cold, wet, pink fish into the warm, savory, tasty fish that we eat at night." Maui's father said, "I guess it is time, my son, to let you know. I use fire." "What is fire?" said Maui. "Fire is the great transformer, and I need it to cook this fish. It's what changes the fish into good meat." "Where is this fire, father?" "Well, if fire is not here yet, I have to get it from grandfather. Your grandfather dwells at the heart of the mountain. Go, ask him for some fire and bring it to me, and I will cook our fish." So Maui went deep and deep and deep and deeper into the caves below the earth until he saw in a distance a glowing space, a great glowing chamber. And there a giant of a man lying beside an ironwood tree that was flickering bright and orange and yellow and throwing sparks into the air like little fireflies. And Maui said, "This must be my grandfather." He said, "Grandfather." And the great giant looked up and said, "Who are you?" "I am your grandson. I am Maui, and my father has sent me to get fire from you." "Ah," said the great grandfather, "you want fire? You must fight for it. Let us play the throwing game. I will throw you as high as I can throw you, and then, once you have landed, you can try to throw me. And if you can play this game with me, you can have the fire." Ah. Well, grandfather thought easily he would just throw the boy away and not be bothered any further. But Maui said, "Okay, I will play." So grandfather lifted Maui up and with one great giant hand swung his arm back and threw Maui, poof, high, 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 high up so that he bust through the top of the mountain, went way up into the sky, and started falling down. But Maui was magic, and he could change his shape. He turned into a little feather and floated lightly to the ground. Grandfather saw that and was worried. Then Maui had his turn, and he changed his shape into a great giant like grandfather, and doing the same, lifting up his grandfather, threw him high, 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 bursting through the mountain's top into the sky. And when grandfather fell, he did not fall light as a feather. he fell hard upon the heart of the mountain, and the entire island shook and trembled with his falling. And grandfather said, "Take the fire." Maui took fire, tried to take it in his hand, but it was hot and it bit his hand. So he took the tail of his cloth, of his waistcloth, and he used it to wrap up some of the fire into the tail of his waistcloth. And this way he came back to his father. But as he was coming back to his father, the sparks from the fire that were burning in his cloth began to spread and jump on either side of the path before him. His father saw him coming, and behind Maui was a growing, roaring fire. Maui's father said, "We must run," and run they did. They ran up, 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 out of the deep underworld, up, 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 away from the heart of the mountain, up, 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 the fire chasing them all the way, and came bursting through the entrance to the cave. And the fire came bursting out too, and great clouds of smoke rose up into the sky, and the fire began to spread. "Maui, what have you done?" said his father. Maui, looking behind him, seeing that the faster he tried to run from the fire, the closer the fire came, because it was with him as he ran. Maui turned, and he began to cry, and his tears burst his shape into that of a great thunder cloud that filled the heavens, and the rains came falling down, and the rains gathered together all the spreading fire that was in danger of destroying the entire island. Maui thought, "What can I do with this fire?" He saw how the trees had caught fire, how the ironwood had been burning when he took the fire from the mountain's heart. And so he said, "I will put this fire back where it belongs." And he put the fire back into the heart of the trees, where it lives to this day, in the ironwood, in the banyan, in the eucalyptus, in many of the woods now. In their hearts is the fire that is replenished by the sun every day. And when we need that fire, we go to the tree, and we open it up, and we rub briskly the wood together, and we call the fire out for cooking, for heating, and for telling stories. And that is how Maui brought fire. I wanted to tell that story this morning, and I hope you enjoyed it. I wonder, it brings up many questions and ideas. One question is, what is the grandfather that keeps fire in the heart of the mountain? What is the secret that the father keeps from the child? What is the fire that can come from those secrets deep underground? How might that story have been inspired by what it feels like to be on an island in the Pacific like Tonga, and feel the earth shake, and see stones fly up out of the mountain's heart, and smoke cover the sky, and fire burst forth? It's an interesting story about the bringing of fire. And if you may remember, last year I shared with you some stories for spring, and I shared with you a story about the origin of corn, in which the hero had to wrestle with the spirit helper. Now, when I tell you these stories, I should point out, come from world cultures distant in time and space from us where we are here today, and me who I am. So I want you to understand, I'm not trying to represent or misrepresent the culture of origin when I share with you these stories. I think stories go through the fires of time and experience and culture, and they transform the way cooking a piece of fish is transformed by fire. And so I share with you the story of Maui as I imagine it, drawn from the elements that continue to be available in the folklore and the written literature of those stories. But I can't begin to imagine that that is the way the story might have originally been told or still be told by the people of Tonga. But this is how I want to tell the story for you this morning, and I hope you will accept that in the spirit in which it is given. So, Maui runs up from the earth, followed by fire, and I wonder if this sounds familiar to you in terms of an image. I've just been thinking about that. I want to tinker a little bit with my my screen here. I don't know if I'm full screen for you at not as I am right now or not, but have you seen an image like this in movies these days, very popular image. A hero or a group of heroes or our main characters are running desperately with a ball of fire exploding behind them. It's one of those favorite little movie scenes. Can you see that? Can you imagine? All of those scenes with the fire chasing them. It seems to be a popular image, and it makes me think about the fires that are burning behind us and the effort with which we're running forward while those fires destroy. Usually in the movies that we watch today, the fire is burning up something that needed burning, right? Usually, right, it's the compound of the bad guy. It's the thing that we're trying to get away from, and we revel in watching the hero run away from it while it is destroyed utterly by fire and flame in the past. Well, every time I see that in a movie, whether it's a Marvel Comics movie or some TV serial, I think about Maui and how he had to go deep down in the earth, wrestle with his past, with his grandfather, find the fire there, and then bring that fire out while it was burning away all that was behind him. Fire is still very useful. Now, since I saw you last, and since I told stories to you all last, I have become a grandfather myself. And I'm delighted to have my own little Maui growing up in his father's arms. But in a grandfatherly way, and those of you who are grandfathers, and I'm sure, and grandparents can appreciate, I have been burning through my own ruminations, my own memories of my life and my past, and who I am and what I received from my grandparents and what I might give to my own. And, the older we get, the more experience we have to compost inside of us. And, compost, when you let it sit there for a long period of time, begins to go through chemical changes, and it can actually burst into flame. And so I feel sometimes at this age that there is this smoldering compost of the past, of the experience of earlier generations, that is bursting into flame. And that flame can be very destructive and scary, but it can also be very useful, as Maui has found, by bringing it into the world, helping us change our experience into something palatable that we can ingest, helping us to stay warm and giving us light to help us find our way. Well, I've gone beyond the story for all ages. I've gone into my talk, and it looks like order of service allows for that, but I just want to check in very quickly with Sandy and my congregation here if we're doing okay. We all right? Okay, great.
Great.
So I ask you, what is the ironwood tree in your heart that holds fire? What can we do with that fire? Here is a story from another place that has been in our present day stories. And I shared that story about Maui, as some of you may have guessed, because recently we saw that story play out in the Pacific on the island countries, the many islands of the Tonga people, and that eruption and the force that it has and the impact it has on the world all around. Here is a story from another place that has been in the modern fires. From the southern slopes and valleys of the mountain of Entoto spreads the ancient city of Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, in northern Africa. Addis Ababa has long been a crossroads for much of the trade routes that go across northern Africa, that connect Asia and Europe, and the southern continent of Africa as well. And long ago, there lived in Addis Ababa, in the shadow of the great mountain Entoto, a great merchant class. They were quite wealthy, being in such a big and growing, thriving city. And one such merchant was a popular citizen, one of the leading citizens of the city. His name was Haptum, great-sized man with much wealth and many slaves in his service. And one of his slaves was a man named Arha. And Arha worked to gather wood for Haptum's fire. Up the slopes of Mountain Toto, he would gather the eucalyptus wood, which would keep the fires blazing and keep Haptum warm. For there off of the slopes of Mountain Toto would often blow cold and bitter winter winds. And even now, in the heart of winter, the city was cold, and the fire was burning. Arha, having made the long journey up the mountainside, gathering wood and then carrying the great heavy bundles upon his back, came into the chamber of Haptum, and he set the bundle of wood down. "Ah," said Haptum, "Arha, you have come just in time. My fire is beginning to dwindle. Build it up, build it up. I'm beginning to feel the cold. When you opened up the door, the wind blew in and made me shiver. Please build up my fire." And Arha went to work, dutifully to his master. What could he do? He was enslaved. And put the wood upon the fire until the flames burned up higher and hotter. And once he had tended the fire, Arha made ready to leave. But Haptum stopped him and said, "Arha, as you were putting up the flames of the fire for me to warm this good room, I was thinking, it must be awfully cold out there on the mountain tonight." "Oh, yes, master," said Arha, "it is bitter cold, and there is ice upon the ground." "Ah, it must be very difficult to live out in the cold and the harsh wind without a nice warm fire to keep one well." "Yes, it is hard to be in the cold," said Arha. "Yes, Arha, I was wondering," said Haptum, "it is a good thing we have fire, and I am glad to have my fire here. I wonder, could a man survive without fire if he were to, say, be stranded alone on the top of the great mountain there, without any fire, without any food, without even the clothing that keeps us warm in the cold winter nights? Could a man survive a night on a mountain in such a condition?" And Arha, bowing his head, said, "Master, I am not one to say, but I do know that often that which has been deemed impossible has been proved possible by those daring enough to attempt the task." "That is what I am thinking too," said Haptum. He said, "I'm curious, and I want to find out if it is indeed possible to survive. I'll tell you what, Arha, would you be willing to stand upon the mountain's peak if I made it worth your while?" "Oh, master, I do not know about such things." "Well, Arha, here is what I offer you. If you stand the night upon the tip of Mountain Toto without any fire, food, or clothing to sustain you, and you can endure the night and survive, I will grant you your freedom. More than that, I will give you land and cattle to raise on that land so that you can be a free and independent landowner like me. What do you say to that?" Arha said, "Master, that is a generous offer and a terrible challenge. But if you say what you mean, that you will give me my freedom and you will give me this wealth, I will attempt to survive the night on the mountain's peak." "Very good," said Haptum. "Go home and make ready. We will go for the mountain's peak tomorrow night." So it was. Arha agreed, and the word spread. Haptum was going to offer Arha, his slave, freedom and wealth if he can survive the night on the mountain's peak. Now Arha went back to the slave quarters where he dwelt with his father and told his father all about the challenge. And his father said, "Why did you take such a challenge? It is a cruel thing for Haptum to have suggested." "Well," said Arha, "I thought, Father, I will die one way or another, and here is a chance for me to gain freedom, and with the wealth that I gain, to buy freedom for you and for others, and for us to live as our own masters. But if I die, I die, and one way or another I will die a slave, unless I make this effort to be free. So his father said, when you get to the mountain's peak tomorrow night, look out across the valley. I will go to the great stone that is in the middle of the shepherd's field, and there, with our community, we will gather and build a fire. Watch ever the fires that we build in the valley. Keep your thoughts upon them, for we will stand the night with you. If you can make it through the night, then you will have your freedom. Arha said, thank you, and so it was the very next night that Hoptum's other slaves took Arha up to the mountain's peak, stripped him of his clothes, and then went down to encamp by a shoulder of the mountain. And there Arha stood on the bare mountain rock, the cold wind of Antoto blowing down upon him, the ice crystals forming in the cracks of the rock, his feet cold against the stone, and the light of the day going out behind him. And all he could see in front of him was darkness and shadow, and all he could feel within him was bitterness and cold. He felt his life draining from him. He wondered what his life might be worth anyway, as a slave to another. Why not let his life end here? He felt the despair of his slavery upon him, and as he was about to fall, he saw in the distance, in the valley, a little light, a little flicker of red and gold, and it grew, and as he watched it, it seemed to call him back from his despair. And he felt in his heart a warmth of companionship, for he knew that was his father there, and that was his community, his friends. There were more little lights flickering up until he saw a second and a third and a fourth, like a constellation of fires in the black valley of night. And all the night long, Arha stared into those lights, stared into the distance, and imagined that fire and its warmth, and remembered the people who were keeping those fires for him, as the wind blew and did its best to take and freeze his heart. And when the dawn crossed over the valley, there he stood still. And when the other slaves came to gather him, they were amazed to find Arha still standing and alive. They wrapped him in blankets, and they brought him in to Hoptum, and Hoptum was amazed as well. Well, Arha, you are made of sturdier stuff than I would have imagined. You have survived the night, without fire, without clothes, without food. And so I am a man good for my word. I will do as I promised. I will give you freedom and wealth in return. But tell me, Arha, I thought it impossible. You made it possible. How was it possible that you could survive such a night? Well, said Arha, he explained, my father and my community, they all lit fires in the valley, and I just simply watched those fires from the distance, and thinking of them kept me warm. Wait a minute, said Hoptum. You had fires? They built fires? I told you you could not have any fire when you were up on the mountain's top. You have broken the terms of this challenge, and I owe you nothing. You are my slave. Get back to work. Arha was defeated by this pronouncement, and word soon spread that Hoptum refused to honor the challenge because he said that Arha had broken the rules by having a fire lit, even though it was a fire in the far valley from the mountain's top. Now it happened in that time that into the city of Addis Ababa came another merchant who was trading in donkeys. His name, you may have heard of him, was the Mullah Nasruddin. Nasruddin was well known throughout the lands where he traveled far and wide, and he was a fairly tricky fellow himself in his own way. Well, he had made a very good trade with Hoptum, trading many of his donkeys, you see, and in celebration of that trade, he said, I will have a great feast. Hoptum, you will be the honored guest. Let us celebrate our good work together. This has been a good trade. And so Nasrudin made plans for the feast. A great pavilion was erected, and kitchens were laid out outside the tents of the feasting pavilion. Now Nasrudin had heard about Arha and his night upon the mountain's top, and had heard about how Haptum had reneged on his agreement to reward him for the challenge. But he continued to honor Haptum as a guest, for he was a businessman, and he knew that he had to keep good relationships. And so the night of the feasting came, and Haptum, the honored guest, came riding on a chair carried by his slaves, including Arha, who felt the weight of Haptum upon his back. In came Haptum, and in came all the other wealthy merchants who were invited to this feast and this celebration, and the pavilion was filled with the smell of the sizzling meats and the steaming broths and the hot breath of the ovens with their sweet breads and savory herbs. Oh, the stomachs of all the guests began to gurgle in anticipation of the good food. There was a long table spread with platter and bowl, with cup and knife, and everyone took their seat, and Haptum at the seat of honor. Nasrudin welcomed them all in gladly. Welcome to the feast, welcome to the feast. Sit yourselves down, and have a wonderful time. He stood there, and they sat there, and they smelled the smells, and they heard the sounds of the wonderful food from the kitchens nearby, and they began to drool in anticipation of the good food that they were going to eat. But they were patient, and they waited, and they waited. And they waited, they made little conversations, they talked about the good trades and the business of the day. But no food came to the table. And soon they became impatient, and Haptum, as the guest of honor, spoke. Hey, what is this all about, Nasrudin? Where is this good food, this feast that you have promised us? Nasrudin said, well, aren't you enjoying it? It's been here in the room all along. What do you mean? Where is it? When do we eat? Where is the food that we can eat? Oh, said Nasrudin, I misunderstood. You see, I thought if Arha could survive a night on the mountain's top, by the heat of a fire many miles away in the valley, I was sure you could enjoy your feast with the smells of the kitchen nearby. Everyone looked at Haptum and gave him a reproving glance, and Haptum had to admit, we cannot eat the smell of the food, no more than Arha could have been warmed by a distant fire. I relent. I was wrong. Arha had succeeded in the challenge. I will give him the freedom and the wealth that I promised him, for I let every merchant here know I am a man of my word. Now, when do we eat? So, the food was finally brought out at last and set out on the tables, and the feast was held, and all enjoyed the good food and the good company, and Haptum made Arha come and sit beside him, now no longer as master and slave, but as equals. And as they ate together, Haptum said to Arha, now, I understand. It was impossible for you to be warmed by those distant fires, but if they could not keep you warm, then how did they help you survive? And Arha had to think about that a moment, but he said, in the end, it was not the heat of the hearths, but the heart of the hearth makers who stood in solidarity with me. And so it was. Maybe all of us can endure the cold when we stand in solidarity with one another. The mischievous child brings forth the secret fires of the past, and oftentimes causes destruction. And all of us who have raised children or are raising children know how there's some things that are out of our hand, that children bring the gift of change and the gift of chaos and fire into our lives, and the gift of memory, and the gift of desire, the spark to light a fire for someone else. What are you going to do with the fire that smolders in the compost of your own experiences? For who will it burn? I have one last story I want to share with you today. And I think of this program of stories that I'm offering you as having the three chapters: the bringing of fire, the holding of fire, and after the fire. What then? What are we burning away, and what do we do with what's left? There is a story that comes from South America, the area that is today Bolivia, from a peoples known, at least to me only, as the Yuracara, first peoples of that place. And they say that long ago there was in the world a spirit, a demon, if you will, of division that hated all humankind and wanted the earth to be rid of this plague of people. And the people became quarrelsome at its bidding. And the more quarrelsome the people became, the more this demon of division saw its opportunity to be rid of them, and inflamed their quarrels, and made them fight until wars broke out between these severed groups of the peoples. And then this demon of division, seeing further its opportunity to be rid at last of the plague of people in the world, it counseled each warring faction to use fire against his enemy. And each faction did. And fires were lit from one place to another until the fire, hungry as it always is, began to consume and engulf all of the world, and all of the world was consumed in flames, and all life perished, and all people disappeared from the face of the earth. Except for one man and one woman, who, seeing the folly of this fighting, came together, and together dug deep down into a cool, damp womb beneath the earth. And there they hid while the fires raged in the world above. And into hiding they brought with them a long stick. They used that stick to see how the fire was burning. They pushed it up into the world above, and when they brought it back down, they saw the tip of that stick was alive with flames. Still the fires burned. So still they hid in the dark. A second time they pushed the stick up into the world, and when they brought it back down, they saw the tip was a glowing, smoking ember. Still the world was hot. A third time they pushed the stick up into the world, and this time when they brought it back down, they saw the tip was cold ash. The fire was out. And so they climbed up out of the world below. And as far as they could see, all was ashen and sere. Cinders spread at their feet. Great clouds of hot smoke curled in the sky above, and a hot wind blew across the waste land. And that demon of division, seeing that there were yet two people standing in the world, came before them and offered them despair. "What are you doing here? Why are you here? Look at what your brothers and sisters have made of this world. This is no place for you. Will you stay here?" And they could have said, "No, we can't stay here." But they said instead, "Yes, we will stay here. This is our world. This is where we belong." And when they said yes, that hot wind grew cool, and the first hints of green sprouts began to appear among the cinders at their feet. But still that demon pressed them with despair, saying, "Here, you will stay here. Here you will be all alone. Here you will have nothing." But they said, "Yes, we will stay here. We are not alone. We have each other." And when they said yes, the sound of water trickling and birds singing began to fill the air, and the world continued growing green at their feet. But still that demon pressed them, saying, "Here, will you stay here?" And still they answered yes, yes, and yes again. And every time they said yes, the world grew green. And every time they said yes, that demon shrank and shrank and shrank until it was gone. And so it is said, the world was made green again after the fire. because one man and one woman had the courage to stand together amidst the ashes and say, yes. Thank you so much for listening to my stories. There is fire in the winter. In this time of the year, February, which root word comes from Latin febris, febricity, febrile, meaning fever. This is the season of fever. And it's not for nothing that we celebrate Valentine's Day tomorrow. It is a feverish celebration. There is heat. There is heat in our hearts. There is heat in the world around us. And some of that fire is frightening. Some of it feels as if it's chasing us like we're running like the heroes in the movies. But it is the fever that heals the wound, that cures the sickness, that draws the sickness out, and opens us up for the possibility of spring. Thank you for listening.
Well, I was very excited that this was about fire. I had written a song at Hanukkah because there's certainly not enough Hanukkah songs. Light the world around you, let your heart be free. Light the world around you so everyone can see. Light the world around you, let your good love flow. Light the world around you so everyone will know. I heard the waves come crashing on the tranquil shore. It breached the levee and it rolled up to my door. A wounded man arrived, his face was turning white. I lit a fire and it burned out through the night. Light the world around you, let your heart be free. Light the world around you so everyone can see. He said a rich man turned from his golden gate, left his only child locked inside a crate. I saw a crowd of people turn their heads away. The sun was setting and the sky was turning gray. Light the world around you, let your good love flow. Light the world around you so everyone will know. I dreamed a better day where wounded hearts would mend, all filled with colors and a love that had no end. Oh, light the world around you, let your heart be free. Light the world around you so everyone can see. Light the world around you, let your good love flow. Light the world around you so everyone will know.
Thank you both. David, that was fabulous. That was just beyond fabulous. And Mike, you reflected it perfectly. It was just a wonderful Sunday for us. We are grateful for the contributions so many of you make to this fellowship. They allow us to sustain and grow our congregation and to confirm our commitment to the larger community. You'll find our mailing address on the website, the Facebook page, and in the newsletter, possibly on phone poles in your neighborhood, who knows? And we are most grateful for everybody's support for everything. We have just a few announcements today. I'm happy to announce that we sent to the UU Justice NC an order for 30 postcard kits. Each kit will let our volunteers write cards to 25 people in Union County who have been dropped mysteriously from the voter rolls and who may not even know it. We will give them the bad news that they've been dropped and the good news about how to get re-registered as proud voters. It's not too late to sign up. If you let me know by this evening, if you'd like a postcard kit or two, I will amend our order first thing in the morning. So our for real deadline is tonight. There's also an opportunity that was shared with us by the North Mecklenburg Progressives to lobby the redistricting committee of the General Assembly about the fair maps they're supposed to be working on. So we'll be sending a message this afternoon with more details. It's a very important social action opportunity, and it's very short term. Those maps have to be delivered to the supervising court by the 18th, and then there's maybe another 3 days for comments on the maps that all the parties in the case are submitting. So it's a sort of short but intense opportunity. Tuesday movies are up and running after a rather bleak streak of movies that were deemed not appropriate to our group's age and level of sophistication. But things are great again. The UU book group has decided to read Nomadland, on which the movie of the same name was based this month. We're still working on the date for the Zoom discussion, but it's likely to be the end of the month or beginning of March. Everyone is welcome to join in. Just contact me for the Zoom link or with any questions at all. Please check the newsletter for more messages, including notes on UU values that always bear repeating, and we're grateful to Regina for adding those in to each newsletter. Our closing words today are from UU Minister Wayne Arneson. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard. The path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down, there is another truth. You are not alone. This will conclude our service today, and we will extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. And please stay with us for the chat with